and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Sarah Hollander. Dr. Hollander is a holistic psychiatrist and a founder of Psychiatry of Life. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Sarah Hollander.
Oh, thank you so much, Courtney. I'm so excited to be here today and talk to you.
Dr. Hollander, I am thrilled to have you on the podcast. And I have to let our listeners know the very first time that I met you, our very first call, we literally spoke, I think, well over an hour and a half, if not even pushing 2.
And it felt like 5 minutes.
It really did. I got to the point where I was even thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this has been an amazing conversation, but I have to give her back her day, to actually have a weekend.
So no, I loved it.
I really did. I had such a blast and I was looking forward to this day, and here we are. So I would love to get right into it. So if you could please start with an introduction and background of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a holistic psychiatrist, like you mentioned. I did start my own practice called Psychiatry of Life. A little bit about me, though. I'm originally from California, now living in Jersey. I do love to sing. I have lived in many different areas because of my medical school training and background, which also kind of led me into why I love different types of people, different experiences. So I carry all of these things with me behind the title.
I just love everything about that. And I have to ask you, so going from California to New Jersey, was that a drastic change for you as far as the weather goes? Was there anything different when you went to New Jersey? Did it strike you differently, or what was your experience there?
The first experience was, what are these turnpikes? Yeah. These jug handles, I don't understand. It was San Francisco is very square. You make a few left turns and you're back to where you started. That is not New Jersey. That was a big change for me.
That's so interesting because I really do have to laugh, because for me, I could remember my first job. I was born and raised in Florida, and they send me to Philadelphia. And number one, the weather was such a drastic change. I do have family from Pennsylvania, but nevertheless, never really drove in snow. And so that was a complete change. And you mentioned that you are a holistic psychiatrist. So did you always know when you were pursuing education at the very beginning that you wanted to go down this route of psychiatry?
I didn't know what holistic psychiatry was when I first started out. I, from a young age, always was very interested in people in a very deep and authentic way. It didn't matter if it was for work. It was just something that has always been innate in me. Even my friends, they're like, okay, they know the kind of questions that will come when they hang out with me, because that's just who I am. It's who I've always been. And when I was younger, I remember sitting down with my grandparents pretty often and just being so amazed by their story. It was a time I had no idea about. I'm like, what are the 30s and 40s? What do you mean there's no telephone? It was just beyond me. And that's kind of where it all started from. So long story short, I did not know. I didn't even know that it existed, and it came over time.
See, that's so interesting. And really my next follow-up question is the difference of more traditional psychiatry versus holistic psychiatry. Did you by chance start in traditional psychiatry and then switch over, or did you go right into it?
Good question. So traditional psychiatry I still do. It's more of, when you think of traditional psychiatry, you think of symptom management. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed. And now we probably give you medication or maybe just do traditional psychotherapy. But that was never enough for me. I don't see people as symptoms. I don't see people as a set of complaints. I see the whole person, which is the reason why holistic psychiatry is more of a philosophy than anything else. And it's more than traditional psychiatry. It's using that. It's still using evidence-based medicine. It's still using all of the same principles that I used from residency and traditional training, and more.
See, that's so interesting. And, you just opened up your practice. So, once again, that is Psychiatry of Life. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would just love to dive into the journey leading up to opening up your practice. And is that something that you knew right away that you wanted to do, or was it more like eventually I'll get there?
It originally was supposed to be eventually I'll get there. And then every time I went into some kind of field or a job, I thought, this just isn't me. This isn't what this, I can't fit this mold anymore. I want to go out there and I want to help others in the way that I feel I'm doing right by them. And right now, the system, the way that it is, doesn't always allow me to do that. And that's also why I started my own practice. It was less about me and more about how can I really help those in the way that I do best.
I love that. And I feel for even those who may not even be within medicine, but want to start their own practice, or they want to do something and trying to get just to take that first step, and perhaps self-doubt creeps in, but then the other days you're like super confident. So I would just love for you to kind of walk through that journey, maybe just more generally, and how you got to that point where you're like, no, I am absolutely going after this 100%.
Good question. I wish that they did more training in residency because they don't tell you how to do any of this part of it. And one of the best things that I did was I joined an online community of other either practitioners or early graduates who wanted to also do the same thing. And we were all just very uncomfortable with the whole process, just like you said. And we need mentors. We need people to be around. We need community. So that way we can learn from everybody.
Absolutely. And when you talk about community, I have my like 3 C's, if you will, for Plenty of Positivity: the communication, connection, and community. And I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like along the way of life, whether it is in career or maybe you're transitioning into a new chapter in life, it's so important to have a support system. And that could be your family, that could be friends, or a community within like a career to really help you along the way. Maybe it's even more strategical and technical to be able to get you to that goal, or maybe it's just the general support that one needs. And so I love that you mention community and the ability to reach out to others and to never be afraid. I think that's like the biggest thing, like at least for myself, is like when you do need help, like don't be afraid to ask for help, you know?
Absolutely. And for me, that's not something I've always done before. And so I have learned along the way I have to do that. And that is how I learn. And it is definitely okay and expected to ask for help. When you finish residency, you don't know everything. You don't. That's why you continue learning. That's why you have mentors. That's why you join groups that constantly help you strengthen your skills. And one thing that I love about psychiatry and really the whole mental health and medicine is there's an art to it that requires you to constantly hone your skill. There's an art to how do you talk to another patient or somebody else, because not everyone is like you. And that's something that you also learn over time. And so it's sort of like, well, you have a whole bunch of different brushes in your toolbox that you can now use to help you connect better with the person across from you.
That's so true. And I think, just being able to, as you speak about being able to speak to other individuals, different personalities, I think that's a skill in itself, let alone the medicine behind it that obviously you have a talent for and you have a craft for. But I think being able to speak to different patients, I could only imagine that really it takes time to build up confidence. And, my next question, kind of heading into more of your career itself, but mental health has obviously been a very large topic of discussion for quite some time now. And I'm just curious about your perspective on it, and what do you feel is perhaps causing some to struggle? Is it isolation? Is it technology? Is there one over the other?
Good question. There's so many different factors going on. Really, you know, I sort of see it as like a pyramid. We are living at the best time, but we're also living at one of the worst times. In terms of what we are exposing our bodies and our minds to all the time. It's what we are feeding ourselves literally and figuratively, whether or not we want to or not, in terms of radiation, exposure to blue light, exposure to plastics. They're all around us all the time, and we're living in a way that our human bodies were never sort of intended to, and at this exponential rate that we have never seen before. And so younger children are also exposed to all of these things, and these are developing humans that are very vulnerable. And so then you start to see these consequences that happen over time. So there's that, and then the exposure to information so much, so quickly. And for young developing brains, again, this is sort of overloading our processes.
No, absolutely. And that's something I think about a lot is from my standpoint, I mean, being within social entrepreneurship, just always on social media platforms, but being mindful, like it's almost like intuitively, sometimes I feel I know I need to step away or I need to be able to focus more on one task to actually finish it, not, finish it halfway and then do something else and then kind of come back to it, because the fragmentation of like the attention span to really go into like a deep learning, if you will, like really taking time to focus very deeply, I think is so important today. I speak about it, even just reading a book. Like I'm the classic person of I want a book, like actually like hand in,
Same.
you know what I mean?
There's nothing like holding a book in hand.
That's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like there really is, like that is the way I do it. I love taking notes, and I think it's so important because there's sometimes even in my mind, like I said, my mind will be going 100 miles per hour and I want to read, but then I'm on to the next thing. And I know that I should not be doing that, that I should be very focused. And, I speak about it too. Like I cut time off for different things. I know when it's, social platform time and I know when it's not, but then at the same time, I get antsy. And so I think about the effects sometimes technology could have on us. And so it leads me into my next question. And I'm curious, like from your standpoint, what are perhaps, it could be three, it could be two, but three simple lifestyle changes anyone could make perhaps to improve their mental well-being?
Oh, sure. Number one, just like you mentioned, less scrolling, and more time outside, breathing fresh air, and in nature. We call that nature bathing. Nature bathing is when you go so far, or not even, but so that you don't get any of the billboards and you don't hear any of the traffic. So you're completely immersed in nature. That is a complete reset from what we normally do. Almost think about going back in time. What were they doing back then? They were walking the earth without any shoes on. Now, I'm not saying go do that, but sometimes putting your feet in the soil or in the sand, you know how good that feels. Everybody knows. So it's reconnecting to earth. That helps to remind us of who we are, that we belong here and part of earth, just as much as if we don't even see it when we're inside buildings. So that's one. Being outside in the sun, not too much, but a little bit, enough to get our vitamin D, get our sunshine, and less exposure to some of the inside stuff, the fluorescent lighting, the blue lighting. Again, not very good for us. And exercise. I cannot stress that enough. So really it boils down to good sleep, good exercise, and adequate hydration. That is the first and foremost for anyone who wants to start to be healthy.
I love this. And when you mention nature, I talk about this a lot, but what is it about nature? Because it's so true. When I go out there and I'm not connected to technology whatsoever, but I'm just kind of like one there and I could hear my thoughts clearly, everything's within clarity. And if I need to maybe somehow like think about a creative idea, it comes to me more naturally than when, I mean, you got notifications going off and different, websites up and everything. So what is it though about nature that really does allow you to be centered and to think more clearly?
Oh, good question. So I'm going to get a little nerdy and neuroscience-y about this. And these are very generalized, so take this with a grain of salt. But we have different networks in our brain that are responsible for doing different things. In the traditional Western world, we have something called the task positive network. That's what we normally are in when we think of task positive. So results, efficiency, linearity, numbers. It's sort of like a kind of thing.
Yes.
But we also have something called the default mode network, which is the opposite, which is about creativity and movement and togetherness and empathy, which is often something that we connect with when we meditate. It's also something that we connect with when we are in nature. So it helps us move into a different type of network. Why do I want to stress this? Burnout is so high. And most people, what they end up doing is they spend an excessive amount in TPN. And then they think, okay, well, if that's the case, I should just rest. Now, yes, rest is important. But really the antidote is also to spend the time in another network, such as the default mode network. That's why your doctor keeps telling you, you should go outside a little bit more. There's a reason he or she's saying that.
See, that's so interesting to me because I do not knowing obviously the medical side of it or the neuroscience side, but just there's something about it. I mean, I have been able sometimes when I really do, I'm trying to think of something creative and you can't force that obviously, but it's only when some of my greatest creative moments are when I'm outside. They're not when I'm in the office, so to speak. And so I've always wondered about that. I'm like, it's almost like you download different things. For example, if I need a certain word or I want to go in this direction, but I'm trying to piece it together, but it really is. So I had to ask you that just with your background and everything. And so my next question is, what role do you believe consciousness, intuition, or inner wisdom play in healing?
So much. So much. And even just going back to nature, because I think it's all connected, really. Spending time in nature, and it will tie back into your question. It's one of the most overlooked, underutilized form of medicine that we have out there. I mentioned before the fluorescent lighting. We were not meant to do that and spend excessive amounts of time sitting, being sedentary. We're meant to be outside. But it's also being in nature reminds us that we are, there's a cyclical nature to our existence as well, meaning the seasons, they come and they go. Trees, when it comes wintertime, the leaves start to fall. They don't panic and go, oh my God, where are my leaves going? They recognize that's all right because I know spring is around the corner. And this is just part of life. And so being in nature helps us connect with your question about consciousness and intuition. And to me, consciousness is what allows us to observe rather than react. It's the moment that we become aware of thought and emotion or physical sensations, and we're no longer outside of it. We're actually in it. We're in relationship with it. And intuition is when we take in millions and billions of input all at the same time, faster than our consciousness can take. That's when that becomes intuition. It's wisdom long before our consciousness even knows what's happening. The body knows way faster. That's why they go, well, but trust your gut.
I want to kind of go back into just mental health. And back in 2023, former U.S. Surgeon General had declared an epidemic on isolation and loneliness, Dr. Vivek Murthy. So what do you believe from 2023 up until now? Have you seen good progression? Do you see that we're kind of turning the curb, so to speak, that in a positive direction, or what are you seeing from your perspective?
It's about the same, I will say. I think people are starting to understand that there's maybe more to life, that forced stopping from COVID really challenged a lot of people in ways to go inward, whether they wanted to or not. It was a hard reset and a hard look in the mirror. And from there, a lot of people started to have worsening of symptoms because now you're sort of facing the eye of the storm, whether you like to or not. And that's kind of where we are now. The good thing, though, is, it's sort of like when you are cleaning your bedroom and you have to take out all the dust from underneath the rug. That's kind of what it did. Was it really exposed so much more as a result of all that, and exposed how much more we really need to focus on this place and on children and adolescents, because they're really being affected so much more.
It's so true. And you're right. I mean, the pandemic without a doubt affected everybody in some capacity, no doubt. But I mean, even think about the workplace, remote work now. I mean, yes, some companies are going back, in person, if you will. But I think that drastically changed when it did come to remote work. The idea that, yes, you could still get some of the work done in an efficient and effective manner in comparison to what it was before. So you're right. I mean, so many things certainly changed after the pandemic. And you bring up like children, teens, like what from your perspective, like what are you seeing right now, just with not directly correlating it, of course, but with technology, how they're growing up with AI and everything. Whereas myself, I'm a millennial, and we didn't really have that. I mean, we barely had social media when I was in college. It was there, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Definitely. Such an important question. The usage of AI, TikTok, it's a little bit too much. The problem is, and the problem with using AI with mental health, and that's even a whole other conversation for another day, but what you're missing is something called the utilization of what we call mirror neurons. When you're talking to somebody else in person, usually, there's something where you can connect, you can feel that person across from you. When you're talking to an AI system, that's not happening at all. And we're missing something as a result of that. So that level of socialization and the strengthening of emotional intelligence is now lacking. And so we are humans who are meant to connect. We are pack animals by nature. We are not meant also to sit at home and be alone, which is also a good point on you about furthering the isolation, furthering mental health problems, probably substance use. This we all have to take into account. And yeah.
No, absolutely. Because that's something I've always been interested in, and it was after I read Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation. The research that is out there is astounding. It's astounding with, and I think it was a multitude of different things. It's not just social media, but it's even just the smartphone in general. The play-based, I love how he mentions that. It's the play-based childhood versus the phone-based. I mean, Dr. Hollander, I could remember when I was growing up, I was always outside on the weekends playing in the cul-de-sac. We had two other boys, and I've certainly mentioned this on the podcast before, but I just remember that. And talking about even like using your muscles, we were riding bikes, not like riding scooters or anything, but legitimately riding bikes. And I have such fond memories of it was obviously communication in person. It was conflict resolution in person. When, arguing over the silliest things at, age 10 or 11. But I think that was so important looking back on it.
Absolutely.
And I was just,
and that's how we develop in the ways that we are supposed to. And so when you're like, what are you seeing? We're seeing kids who are even young adults. They're not young. They're really cognitively speaking, or developmentally, speaking, they're probably in their teens.
That's so true. And my next question, it really does. It's like a follow-up to this, but when we talk about like mental health, like as we kind of glance into the future, do you see promise? Do you see something good to come of mental health as we move forward? Just your
Oh,
thoughts in general.
absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I would love to talk about is the message of giving hope back to people, to patients. The medical system has done its best, but it's time for a change. We are changing, systems need to change, and we are really at this point now where we have a lot more practitioners who want to make changes to the systems, both on an individual and a collective basis. I am part of that system. That's why I've kind of gotten out on my own to help heal in the way that I think is a better way and needed way. Patients want to have different kinds of conversations that traditional psychiatry doesn't really maybe allow you to have, or traditionally back in the day. Now it's a lot more, you can talk about it, but it's now we're understanding so many different more aspects and components to care that we weren't really taking into account before. So now it's going to be this huge mindset shift. I mean, even the NIH came out with something called the RDOC, the Research Domain Criteria, which talks about looking at the whole person through a systems-based lens, not just a series of, questionnaires or systems of, oh, you're just depressed and anxious. No, it's looking at everything. It's looking at, does this person have meaning in his or her life? Does this person have hope? What's their nervous system like? Is it always on? Are they fawning, freezing, those kinds of things? So I'm super, super, super excited about this change, even in terms of philosophy and approach that's happening, and telling patients, please don't lose hope. There are practitioners like me, practitioners like Dr. Diana Londoño, who are doing it differently, and we are here to have these conversations with you. We see you, we hear you, and we want to help you.
I love this. And I admire the fact that you have taken the action, like you said, to open up your practice. Like, you are making the change. And my question is, like, just following up to this is, what can, whether it's other practitioners do? Like, I'm not in the system, I don't really know what's going on, but like, what is the main change that needs to happen? Like, would you say that if a physician can in fact open up their own to make that change, do they do that? Or could they make other changes to really see something new and something refreshed, something different?
Good question. I think it's a mindset shift. So it doesn't necessarily, you can still be in the system, so to speak, and do all of these things to some degree. That's going to be changing, I do believe. But it's also just like I said earlier, it's a philosophy. So for example, I was just at a networking event and I met this wonderful gastroenterologist who was telling me, I've really come to understand there's so much more of a connection with mind, body, gut, soul, all this stuff. And I have to start looking at that. And it starts there. It starts with that awareness of, oh, there's probably more to what we are seeing than what we understand. And it's time to look outside of that box. That's where it starts. And it starts on an individual level.
That's so interesting. And as you're speaking, it reminded me, do you think that the way education is, like, as you do go through your degree program, do you think that is also where it would need to change as far as perspective?
Absolutely. Yes. Because the traditional psychiatry model is still there. And until we can figure out ways to, we work on the biopsychosocial model in traditional psychiatry. So we're looking at biological factors, psychological factors, and sociological factors. As a holistic psychiatrist, now we're adding in other things like existentialism, spirituality, because these are also components that provide an extra oomph and zhuzh to someone's life. Everybody, people will say, I don't have my purpose. What is it all for? What does it mean? My life is meaningless. These are important questions to be able to answer. And if I don't take that into consideration with a patient, I'm not seeing the whole person.
So true. And literally, like, to kind of go in that direction, there has been certainly times in my life when I've opened up that next chapter, and I do, like, I get anxious. I don't know what's coming next. It's like, it was like this sense of what is my purpose? Like, what am I truly passionate about? And it wasn't literally until I started doing what I'm doing now. But I asked this question because if there's anybody that's listening that is really trying to understand their purpose, or they're maybe struggling, like, how could they go about doing that? And I don't know if it's just one way, or if you could just recommend how you could find that sense of like excitement in the morning to wake up and to drive towards, whatever it is that you want, that's your passion.
Yeah, I say figure out what your why is. Earlier on I said it's scary to open up a practice. But if I stop thinking about my fear and I start thinking about all the people that I can help, and when it stops being about you and you make it about something bigger than you, that is what is going to help drive you to whatever next thing you need to do. It doesn't always need to be that the next thing is it. But if you try and you work from that calling and that place of being pulled, that's the way to go. And so when you have that answer, why? That's how I get up every morning. Why am I doing this? And I say to myself, I get to do this sacred work that's so beautiful and it provides so much meaning to me. That's what keeps me going. But that might be different for someone else.
I love this, Dr. Hollander, because it's so true. Like for me, when you were talking about, it's almost as if you were speaking about like even that sense of ego, of letting that go. It's not about you, but that you're doing this for a greater purpose. It's something larger than yourself. That is something that I have been thinking about, and I reflect a lot internally as to certain points of my life. Like, when did I feel so anxious, and why did I feel so anxious, versus the times when I wake up with sheer excitement, like you were mentioning. And it's not always been that way. And I want to make that very clear, but I think that there's something to be said about that why, that it really does. It helps you overcome the fear. And I always like to give this example of like a rocking chair, like, fast forward, God willing, I'm 80 years old, sitting in a rocking chair, but it's that sense of, I don't want to regret not trying something. At least I could say that I tried something, versus living with regret to overcome maybe that present fear that I'm kind of experiencing at that very moment. So it's imagery, I
Oh,
guess.
yes. What you just touched upon reminded me of, I'll have this conversation with patients quite a lot. And it reminded me of something what I call the liminal phase. And I'll explain why this is connected. But to me, the liminal phase is the space in between. It's the space where, you know, I don't want to go back to whatever that was before. I don't know what's to come. I just know I'm in this mucky in between, but I know I can't do whatever that was. And so what you're talking about is not living in the space of in between for very long. That requires you to make decisions and act with trust and faith from that place of being called, right? And trusting and knowing that when you make that decision to act, your inside, your intuition, your deep wisdom will go, that's not right for me. And then when you keep acting with that integrity, that will deepen that calling that you have and deepen that connection that you have. And that's what I love to do, is I see myself as like a mirror and a guide that helps to ferry souls into their own becoming.
That's so true. And what's so interesting that you mentioned, I finally I had posted about it, maybe, I don't know, it was like several months ago, but it really was like, as I was going through how I developed what I developed, how I went in certain directions, but it was kind of leading back to one of my questions, but intuition. I can't explain it other than it was like an intuitive nudge to go in a direction. And I wrote about this when I first started on my website. I really did. I felt deeply compelled to go in this direction. I had the mission, I had the vision, but quite frankly, Dr. Hollander, I didn't really know where I was necessarily headed, but I trusted and I had the faith that in these very moments when I needed that, next direction, or, to wake up the next morning with sheer excitement and to know what direction to take, it really was going to fall in line. And so you're right. When you talk about spirituality, like, I think you're right. It's like all connected in some capacity. Cause
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel I don't know, please expand. Cause I don't know this stuff, but I'm just trying to speak upon the way my mind tells me, but I don't know.
I would even go so far as to go, it's your whole being that's telling you.
Yes.
Because I tell patients all the time, I'm like, you're not just your head and neck. They often forget that, but I go, can you look down at your feet, please? Because you're not just your head and neck. You are your entire body. And
True.
and your entire body is a collection of all of the decisions that you've made, all of the emotions that you carry, all of the stories and the meaning that you give to the stories, all held in one space in one time. And when you're talking about that, all of that wisdom is there, and slowing it down, right? And getting back into that default mode network, going into nature, or going into, or doing any of the things that get you back into that space will help you connect again.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, not to reiterate it, but I'll never forget it. When I was first starting this, I needed the words. I don't know how to explain it, but literally life, sport, and career popped into my head. It was like a download. I am not making this up.
I believe it.
And that's why I say, like, it's not like it was just like some grand creative idea, but it was just the point of, I could hear deep down, it was a passion of mine, but I didn't know how to verbalize it. That's what I'm trying to say. I didn't know how it would come to life from an idea, from a passion, and how it would translate into the quote, like, physical realm. But it was when I was out in nature that I felt that sense of connection. And then maybe it's, generally speaking, source, whatever you consider source to be. But that is when I found my direction, my meaning. And then I pieced it together. Life, sport, career. How do I talk about life lessons? Well, a podcast. And so I give this example because I just want to offer hope. And everything that you have spoken about today, Dr. Hollander, really does allow people to have that hope, that sense of, if they are still trying to find that purpose, that they will find it. And my next question before we close out, I thought this was so exciting when I was doing my research for this conversation, but you love to sing, you love to dance, and you love yoga. So please, Dr. Hollander, let me know all about the singing and the dancing.
My mom is my best. She's my favorite. What do you call it? She loves me the most. She's my biggest fan.
I love
and
it.
She has, I'm sure, videos of me when I'm 3 years old putting toys away and still singing. It's just something that I've always done. And it was a when we talked about, like, the default mode network, all those kinds of things, when I sing, I really do get into another space. I get into the flow. I get into a rhythm that's, like a higher order of things, a higher level of consciousness in that way. And I flow and I sit there, and it's such a beautiful space to be. And most of the time I love to sing opera and classical music, because that's just where my singing goes. So that's just how I connect the most. And then yoga, we talked about, you're not just a brain and a neck. Yoga reminds you that you can put legs in places that they probably shouldn't go, and put yourself in a pretzel, but still have to look at yourself and smile and go and relax. And it just reminds me of what life really is. You're going to feel like you're in a pretzel oftentimes. Sometimes you're going to feel like you're in child's pose. But for the most part, You breathe through it, you take it with joy, you take it with ease, and you take it with gratitude.
That is such an excellent analogy. I love everything about that. And what's interesting, Dr. Hollander, is I've been trying to get myself, I've taken like one yoga session. I know that sounds like terrible, but for me, it really is, it's like that sense of high energy, but it's exactly what you're talking about, that you really do. Sometimes you just need to rest, you need to relax. And that's something I have to get a little bit better at. And so I think yoga would definitely be such a good fit. It's just a matter of being able to do that and to, like you said, whether it's like the positions and stuff, but more of like the mindfulness, I think is what I need
Yes,
so
correct.
much, you know. But you talk about the singing. I had to ask you real quick, are you part of maybe a group like with opera, or do you just do it on your
No, but I
solo?
would love to be. That was something I put on my list after I finished residency. I was like, I really need to get back into singing of some kind, lessons. It's been a few years. I'm not going to lie. I did study. I took lessons at the Conservatory of Music way back in the day, when I was in my teens. I loved it. I want to get back into it, so we'll see.
That's incredible. And well, Dr. Hollander, you have had so much success. Like I said, you opened up your own practice, but I have to ask you, like, maybe it's not right now in the present time, but maybe in the future, but like, what is actually next? Because that's such a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I have to remind myself that it is a pretty big deal. To me, I called it Psychiatry of Life because right now it's a practice that just includes myself. But I have so many different ideas. I talked about being, sort of called, that I'm kind of going off of that in terms of what my next steps and what my next directions are. Connection, you used as a word, is huge for me. I think as AI and technology becomes so fast, connection to humans is going to be so important. And so with that being said, in the future, I do think that I'm going to try and build some kind of a community of other like-minded practitioners who are into more of the holistic, integrative kind of space. So that way we can build a community for patients, really. So that way we can say, oh, I know this urologist, by the way, like Dr. Diana, who also comes with that same background. And so you know that if you're going to refer a patient, they're off in good hands. That's what I'm trying to put together. And then we can all learn from each other and grow together.
I love everything about that. And, like I said, I mean, huge congratulations, like staying in this present moment that you opened up your practice. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. And so I just want you to know that, but your thoughts for the future, so grand and so I could tell the passion that you have behind it, because you're right. I feel like in general, the connection and the community, without a doubt, as AI comes full force, it's already been here as we know, but full force, that human connection, there's nothing that's going to be quite like that. So I love how you mentioned that. And Dr. Hollander, we love to round out every podcast episode with a positive message or a positive quote for our community.
One of my favorite quotes is, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And for me, that something is helping people restore the rhythm, one soul, one nervous system, one moment of coherence at a time.
I love everything about that. And you just summed up this podcast episode so incredibly well. I am so grateful. I really did. I looked forward to this podcast episode so much because with your background, as I was asking you during the podcast episode, like, I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but like you know exactly what I'm saying to explain it correctly. So that's what I was looking forward to
Aw.
so much. But
Thank you so much for having me. You are such a joy to be around. You have such a light around you, and I'm so glad that you're doing this podcast. Yes, we need to spread positivity and joy and gratitude and just spend more time in these emotions that give us more meaning and openness rather than constriction. So
Dr.
thank
Hollander.
you for doing this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And like I said, it was such a pleasure to have you on this podcast episode. And I cannot wait for, maybe it's even part two. I would love to have you back
Maybe.
on. So thank you so much, Dr.
Absolutely.
Hollander.
Thank you so much, Courtney.